जी ये है मेट्रो, सामने मेट्रो का साइन बना हुआ है। अभी यहाँ से हम जो है मेट्रो स्टेशन में जा रहे हैं। लोग काफ़ी ज़्यादा हैं, मेरे ख्याल से यहाँ से की जो मेट्रो है ना वो बहुत ज़्यादा बिजी रहती है। मेट्रो काफ़ी ज़्यादा बिजी है इधर की। यहाँ से जो है ना हम करेंगे एंट्री। ये हमारी एंट्री होगी। यहाँ से अभी हम जाएंगे नीचे। ये भी फास्ट है, बहुत गहरा है यार। स्टेशन जो है ना बहुत ही नीचे बनाया हुआ है, बहुत ही गहरा है। ये है स्टेशन, ये स्टेशन है, ये मेट्रो आ गई है। जी हम जो है अगला भाई स्टेशन पे पहुंच चुके हैं। अभी हम स्टेशन से जो है ना बाहर निकल रहे हैं। यार बहुत ही गहरा बनाया हुआ है, उफ आप देख सकते हैं। तो जी मेट्रो से जो है ना बाहर आ गए। यार ये मेट्रो इन्होंने बहुत ही गहरी बनाई हुई है, मैंने फर्स्ट टाइम देखी है इतनी गहरी। आप हिसाब लगा लें, जो एलिवेटर है वो तकरीबन 200 मीटर का एलिवेटर है। 200 मीटर लेंथ है उसकी एलिवेटर की, और 45 की डिग्री में एलिवेटर है। और एलिवेटर भी जो है वो फास्ट चल रही है, ठीक है, स्लो नहीं है, फास्ट नॉर्मल जितनी हम मॉल्स में देखी हैं उससे डबल स्पीड में चल रही है। फिर भी ऊपर आने के लिए हमको 1 मिनट और 1 मिनट और 50 सेकंड लगे हैं। कंटिन्यू एलिवेटर चल रही थी, आप हिसाब लगा लेंगे कितनी गहरी होगी। अभी इधर मैं जो है ना अपने टूर गाइडेड का जो है वेट कर रहा हूँ, इधर ही उसने बोला था आने के लिए, देखते हैं।
The one who moved the capital from Steta to Tbilisi. Steta is outside of the city, around like half an hour ride, and it's comparatively smaller town. So once the king arrived here, King of Lang discovered the natural defense by the mountains over the city, and he also discovered the natural warm waters. All right, so these warm waters are supposedly the area where we have now the sulfur baths. Okay, so this is why we consider that the sulfur baths district nowadays could be the first place ever which was called as Tbilisi, because Tbilisi in translation is like warm waters. Okay, so our name is connected. There is a statue symbolically expressing the legend how we had the new capital. So let's enter the place.
तो हमारा जो है ना टूर स्टार्ट हो चुका है। तो हम मीटिंग पॉइंट के बाद जो है इधर निकले, इनके ऑफिस में गए थे। इन्होंने पानी वगैरह कॉफ़ी वगैरह हमको पिलाई, जो हमारे सामने जो है ये एंट्रेंस है, ठीक है। सामने केबल कार है, केबल कार में भी जाएंगे हम। हमारे टूर गाइडेड है, तो बहुत ही नाइस है, ज़बरदस्त। ये हमारे साथ ग्रुप मेंबर हैं, तो इटली से हैं।
Okay, and in front of us there is the statue of the king Botanical, the one who discovered the place and moved the capital from Theta here. So, as I told you, soon afterwards he built up the residency on this place, which was totally burnt and ruined in 1235 by the Mongolians incursion. The Mongolians stayed here for 1 century exactly. Okay, so it was really tough times. For example, soon after destroying the palace, it was 1280s, 1280 precisely, because in 1281 the king who was sold out to the empire of Mongolians and who decided to go to save the country from the destroyment. He was killed in 1281. This king's name was Demetre II. That Georgian grateful people call him devoted because he saved his country with the price of his life. I mean, he almost went to the death for saving the country. But before he did that, he built up this church in nearby 1270. Called it Metekhi Church. It's dedicated to Saint Mary, the Virgin Mary. I mean,
Mike,
oh,
Mike, so easily I can record.
okay. Is it turned on? Okay, guys, let's continue. So, as I told you, the church is under the name of Saint Mary, and it had a various history, to be honest. Because in 1800, sharply we were annexed by Russians, and yeah. So even though they were also Orthodox Christians, and that was the main reason for our king Narikala II to get this as partners with Russians, they took off the place and it was ringed by the wall, and there were like the prison rooms and the offices, so they turned it into the prison, the church. And later on, it was Laurent Beria, one of the Soviet authorities, who had also his own governmental offices on this place. And by the end of Soviet times, around like 1970s, they turned this place into a theater, which is also interesting, right? So the church, the prison, the governing state, the theater, so it's quite a lot for one place. And now I want you to follow me upside. We will see the door preserved from the prison times, and also the whole wall with the carvings by the prisoners. It's in the Russian language, but yeah, it's majorly the first half of the 20th century. It was broke in 1940, so lasted like for 120 years. The place was used as a prison. And by the way, we had one of the famous prisoners in this church prison. So I'm sure you heard Stalin, the dictator of Soviet Union, who was originally Georgian. And he was arrested 6 times before he became the big leader and dictator. Out of the 6, 5 times he was banished to Siberia, but only once he was kept in Tbilisi, on this right place. So that's another thing the place is famous for, probably. Taking some pictures with you at some locations, so please join me. Yeah, come everyone. The door. You can see that as for the design, it's not quite as refined as the church door. And you can see the lock on it, which is definitely not the church door as well. So on this wall, you can see some letters carved in Russian language, which is basically the names of the prisoners and the dates, like 1905, 1919, 1919 over there as well. And 1919 has actually several of them. It's one of the most common dates. So yeah, they decided to leave their identities to this place. And then, yeah, as I told you, then it was kind of like the governing place, and finally ended up as a theater. King of Kakheti, the East Georgia, because like since 16th century, Georgia was split into several regions, so it was really tough times, to be honest. And King Narikala II was the king of Kakheti, and he and his father tried to unify it with Kartli, the other region. So he took off the damage. So King Narikala decided to fortify the place and to put this place for the sacrifices and for the service dedicated to the god and to the prayers and so on and so forth. It was around 1770s, the same period that he built up the palace over there that we will pass through a bit later on. So yeah, he really tried his best to give this place to the people for worshipping. As for the church, I mentioned as like theater, prison, so on and so forth. And as for the active church, it was reopened in 1988. For the last 34 years, the church is active. We have the masses, ceremonies, baptizing, like marriages, all the ceremonies the church is open to. So thankfully, we maintained it as a church. But as for the frescoes, as for the inside, if you're gonna have a wish, you can enter. So for you, it's gonna be harder. I mean, you need a scarf, and you need to cover your head and the legs as well, because no trousers and for entering. Yeah, so dress code is really hard for Georgian people, but I'm gonna help you out. There is the basket with the scarves. So let's head to the entrance then. For the boats, it's okay. It's just for Irfan. You would be just taking off the cap when you enter. So in Georgian churches, it's not allowed to have a hat for a man. Okay, let's go. Yes, for below. And churches is that so when you look even from outside, you can see that there are no benches. So in our churches, you stand for these couple of hours of the mass, and like 1 or 2 hours, depends on the occasion. If there's like some saint's day or like holiday to celebrate. Sorry, I just want to mention that those are the graves. So yeah, it's not your fault. It's not limited or something. So I'm just warning you. Yeah, and about the dress code, about all the rules that are really strict for these churches. And as I've learned and as I'm concerned, it's because that Orthodox branch is one way or another maintained the original way of Christianity, and they feel like more responsible of punishing the Jesus and crucifying him. So the idea is that you should suffer physically and dedicate your full body and spirit to the mass when you are in there. So no benches for sitting, nothing simplification, everything should be in order. So that as well. And we will see the palace, we will see the fragment of the Berlin Wall, actually, and then we'll go to the Rike Park, by which we will achieve to the Bridge of Peace. So let's keep it up. Okay, so from here starts the palace of Queen Darejan. So I mentioned that this palace was built up in the same period as Metekhi Church was reconstructed last time before the Russian Empire, and the king was Narikala II. All right, so King Narikala II built up this palace for his wife, for his third wife actually, because previous two died unfortunately. So her name was Darejan. Darejani. So this is Queen Darejan's palace, also known as eye-catching, like Sachino in Georgian. Nowadays, of course, it doesn't function as a palace, but it's still preserved as a museum, and there are the nuns who are actually living or paying attention to the place. So standing here over like 250 years. And yes, one of the big symbols and also the examples of how men should love women, actually. Compared, for example, at least to Narikala Fortress or to another royal palaces that we ever had, it's like different. They are like precious, they are magnificent. So they should tell the story that this is the king's place. But for the woman, this was, of course, generally the atmosphere that she needed. And also it was a palace. So for her, it was quite enough. And there was the small church as well in the area, and the magnificent balcony, which is the most famous part of this palace now. Yeah, it's really nice actually. If you go there, as far as I know, it's possible to enter and see from inside as well. When was it built? Like predecessors and descendants, they have the villa in one of the resorts of Germany, Baden-Baden. So yeah, quite a nice thing, and even the Georgian people got the symbolic gift from the center of Berlin. So let's go now. As I mentioned, the name of the park is Rike. In Georgian it sounds like Rike. Rike Park was built on the place of the former apartments and former, how to say, like Rike actually is the place with the branch of the river, where it's like the narrow stream with some rocky banks, and this was the place around in like 17th, 18th century when we had the branch of river Mqvari alongside of the city coming to this side as well. But when it dried out, it was the end of the 18th century or beginning of 19th century, people started to build up the houses. You can even see some of the ruins preserved on the top of the mountain. So they started to settle in this area. And the toponymy of Rike, as the area was called by the times of the river in here, was preserved. So even the park got the name from this, Rike Park. And the park within the cable cars was all organized in 2009. And since then it's one of the most popular areas, of course, even more for the young generations. It's really nice to come here. There are lots of entertainments. They take cable cars upside, and there are some cafes as well. And majorly they also love to go towards the Bridge of Peace that we are streaming to now. So yes, one of the full package of activities for the teenagers and not only. And to the right here we have the monument called the Tree. But as usually I'm having the interpretation of Tree of Freedom. And why? This tree in front says Gabriadze in Russian letters. Gabriadze, if we just translate or just get the function of it from the Soviet Union, was the specialized dungeon with the strict rules and for like the big criminals actually, but of course it was unattainable for the people. So of course they would love to get out of it. And on the branches we have the cages and the birds. So similarize that since the birds are like free spirits and they prefer to be out of the cages, as same way as people, bless you, same way as people were trying to get out of Gabriadze. So to me it sounds like right to interpret this way, like fighting for freedom and independence as we always did during the Soviet or Russian times. So yeah, we can associate it with that fact as well. Other than that, it's only called tree itself. So now, for the first time, we're gonna be skipping the cable cars. We will go behind of the town, and I want you to see this small show, symbolic one on the clock tower, how the angel will ring the bells and so on and so forth. Then we will see like the oldest church of the city, probably the one you saw, the Basilica, the Patriarchate of Georgia, and the Sioni Cathedral as well. Then we will have lunch, by the way, Madlova, with the traditional bakery. And afterwards, we will go backside to the Metekhi bridge. We'll keep up the notifications and reminders step by step. Let's try continue. It's wet again. It might be really slippery, guys, so watch out. Because once one of my guests almost fell, I'm always not finding out. It's like tricky material. By the way, do we have any kind of questions so far about anything?
I'd love to have a theater or maybe exhibition hall, something cultural
Or educational, maybe, within the entertainment. Now we have all of these constructions because Georgia is hosting the Eurobasket.
Oh yeah.
And it's like the big noise in the city, so. Now I will personally. So, Bridge of Peace behind us, and it was installed in Tbilisi on this place in exactly May 2010. However, it was brought from Italy because the architect is Michele De Lucchi from Italy. Yeah, I was always saying Michele De Lucci, but one of the Italian women was like, it's Lucchi. Okay, so then I corrected. So Michele De Lucchi also designed the presidential palace over there with the glass dome. And also there's like a bit outside of the city center, it's the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which is totally transparent as well. So he probably loves the glass constructions.
Yeah.
And so did Mikhail Saakashvili, our third president, who implemented all of these things. That's what we were discussing before. So he saw something in Italy or in somewhere in the Europe or in the America, and he wanted to bring it here. So one of the big examples, the construction was brought here by over 200 trucks, because it's like, yeah, over 150 meters constructions, I guess, and it has around 50,000 LED lights inside of the construction, which is lit up by the evening time. War and peace. So there are like lots of symbolics this bridge is attaining, so the name is also symbolic, of course.
So yesterday in front of the parliament, I think we saw a sign that says "Free Saakashvili."
Some people are protesting him to be imprisoned.
Oh.
So there are a lot of happened. Okay, so it's like for the person to be the president. So of course the people who are originally also really tired of his system and of his ruling.
they got a bit rebellious and protesting things. One of the leaders, and I would say major leader, was Saakashvili, and it was in November 2003. So 23rd of November of St. George Day, Mikhail Saakashvili with his followers, they entered the parliament literally with the red roses and kind of changed the president and the government as well. There was nothing like not a bloody days or something. So Eduard Shevardnadze calmly left the building and he announced that he is going home. And in 2 months, in January 2004, we officially elected Saakashvili with a great majority of the votes as our third president. Madlaba. Since then, a lot of changed in the city and in the whole country, I would say. The main reason that you are here, for example, or we had so many tourists since like 2000s, is because he reconstructed majorly the whole country. He modernized and constructed a lot of places in Tbilisi. In Kakheti, like Sirnagi, city of love, was fully changed in his time. Svaneti, like Mestia, which is one of the great resorts nowadays. Batumi on the seaside, which got totally modernized, and people were talking about like similarizing with Barcelona. And yeah, I know it's funny, but actually it's not that far. I mean, there are lots of great monuments and places over there. So that's what I mean. Whatever he liked outside and wanted to be closer to Europe or closer to some progressive world, he would implement it in here. All right, so about the bridge, you would like to have some. So the author of the tower was named Rezo Gabriadze. So Gabriadze established the puppet theater in around 1980s. And from the same time, he started to collect the different pieces from abandoned and old buildings, which were getting like spread and wasted or abolished. So he maintained some of the pieces from really old times. And there are some of the associations. There is also the Greek-styled columns, so the Greece, and there is a construction of iron or metal to the left, which is as though holding the tower, but it's actually part of donkey bridge. Donkey bridge we were using for putting the cargo, like, and just deliver it from one side of the river to Meydan Bazaar, the one that you will visit by the end of the tour. It's of course shrink the idea, but you will see what products they would sell. So he was associating it himself with Eiffel Tower construction pieces. So we have France as well. So different types of reveals and responses and greetings towards Europe. But of course, when you look at the tower, there is the big influence from Iran or from Arabic style, like balcony is totally Persian. And the colors and the details and the mosaic we will see a bit later, they will definitely come from the idea that Tbilisi was more or less always multicultural, multi-ethnical and multi-religious. For the religion we have a lot of proofs, like having so many types of praying houses. Obviously, first of all, since 88% of our population is Orthodox Christian, we have Orthodox churches, Georgian, Russian, Greek. We have a Catholic church, we have Apostolic Armenian church, we have a synagogue, we have a mosque, and we have even the ruins of Zoroastrian temple from Iranian times. So quite a big variety, right? Which is proving how important it was to be a tolerate and open to any type of people who would come here and not kind of limit them and not to be violating over their beliefs and lifestyle. So this mixture of the colors and styles is connected to this idea as well. So I just tried to deliver the information that he was explaining himself. So Rezo Gabriadze passed away last year only. So this tower is definitely the modern one, but because of all old pieces, it's really confusing, to be honest, from which period it is. I've heard like 8th century, 10th century, 14th, 18th. It started in 1980s and finished in 2010. The date is on the tower. Later on after the show, we will get closer. We will see this date, we will see the mosaic from the closer effect and the zoom. And I will show you the smallest clock on the tower in the city, which was added later in 2016. So over there, I want also to take into consideration the writing downside the round window on the building, which is in Latin. So it says, "May the only reason for your tears are the onion petals."
तो जी हमने जो है नीचे का विज़िट करते हुए, ठीक है, काफ़ी चर्च देखे जो कि बहुत पुराने चर्च बने हुए थे, ठीक है, बहुत ही पुराने 18th सेंचुरी के 17th सेंचुरी के, ठीक है, तो बहुत ही ज़्यादा जो है ना खूबसूरत। उसके बाद हम निकले इधर केबल कार की राइड के लिए। तो अभी जो है ना केबल कार की राइड के लिए जा रहे हैं। जो हमारा टूर गाइडेड है वो टिकट लेने गया है, टिकट लेके आएगा वो एंट्रेंस। अभी हम जा रहे हैं केबल कार में। चाहिए है केबल कार का एंट्रेंस। तो अभी हम जाने वाले हैं अंदर। अच्छा, इसका नीचे से ऊपर जाने का अलग टिकट है, ऊपर से नीचे आने का अलग टिकट है। तो हमने डिसाइड किया हम नीचे से ऊपर जाएंगे बाय केबल कार और ऊपर से नीचे आएंगे बाय वॉक, क्योंकि ऊपर से नीचे आना बाय वॉक इजी है, नीचे से ऊपर जाना जो है वो थोड़ा मुश्किल होता है। इसलिए हम नीचे से ऊपर जाएंगे बाय केबल कार और ऊपर से नीचे आएंगे बाय वॉक। तो हमारा टूर गाइड जो है वो टिकट्स लेने गया हुआ है, तो जैसे टिकट लेके आता है तो हम जो है एंटर होते हैं अंदर। बहुत ही खूबसूरत जगह है यार। लाइफ में मैं आपको मशवरा देता हूँ कि एक बार ज़रूर आओ, विज़िट करो जॉर्जिया को, बहुत ही ज़बरदस्त है। टिकट ऑफिस में पहुँच चुके हैं। आई थिंक 9 ले रहा था, 9 जो है ना जॉर्जियन लारी की टिकट है, सामने लिखा हुआ। ये सामने एंट्रेंस है। तो ये हम जो है ना अंदर आ चुके हैं। तो वापस हमारे आ गए केबल कार की। हम अपनी बग्गी में जो है ना तकरीबन बैठ गए। अभी हम जाएंगे।
To our hostess, Mother of Georgia. First thing you should know, never identify her. It's not King Tamara, it's not Mother of God, it's not any particular person. This is Mother of Georgia, so it means all the mothers, all the women in the Georgian history are expressed with her. And why? Because, well, Georgia is like Sparta. It's famous for fighters, for soldiers, and the boys were risen up to be the soldiers. Okay, so what was happening is that the women were staying alone at home to take the care of the hotbed and of the children, of everything, to be men and women all together. We even have the word Deda Katsi. Deda is a mother and Katsi is a man. To express all the functions, they would mix and they would just like take over all the responsibilities. Okay, this is why we have mother and not the father. It's also interesting. And this mother, she's not like weak woman. She's not slender. I mean, her appearance is also quite masculine. She's quite strong, independent woman. In the right hand, she has the sword that if you come like an enemy, I will fight you. But in the left hand, she has considerably full of wine, a bowl, that if you come like a friend, we will host you well, like sweet with our wine, and we will just let you to have any type of life you want. But we have the modern interpretation, like for anything else. If you don't drink with us, we can kill you. It's so funny. So there was a time when the statue from 1958 was damaged. So the government decided in 1997 to replace it with a new one. This is the date of the current statue, but there was the time around a couple of days when we had something like this, like two statues together. I will try to manage since we are in the cable car. Yeah, like this.
Oh, nice.
Like two statues together because people in Tbilisi protested, so we don't want a day without her. So first they put the new statue and then took the old one.
Okay.
Behind me you can see the
तो केबल कार से हम जो है ऊपर आ चुके हैं।
Cathedral of Holy Trinity was built in before 1995 and 2004. It was finalized by the time of Mikhail Saakashvili in 2004. Tbilisi was 23rd of November, St. George's Day. And by the way, when they were preparing the basement for the church, they discovered the pieces from Narikala Fortress down here because of the 19th century explosion of the gunpowder. The pieces were just thrown and tossed across the river, and it was appearing just around the uphill where they were putting the church to. And to the left, to the very left, I want you to look at the Holy Mountain. So, Tminda. Ta means the mountain, and Holy is Tminda. So, to the left is Tminda with the TV tower, which is always compared to Eiffel Tower, and we love this better. And next to it is one of the best restaurant complexes, as people say. There are really famous cream rolls, by the way, and around there is the amusement park with the Ferris wheel, with the roller coaster, the video games, shooting places, so surprises, touristic park, contact zoo.
तो वो सामने है जी मदर ऑफ जॉर्जिया, उसका स्टैचू जिसको पुतला बोलते हैं। इसको स्पेशल जो है टूरिस्ट देखने के लिए नीचे से ऊपर आते हैं।
خدای گربیجا. او تنها ماشین არ მევასებოდით. საერთოდ ხავთომ კაი ურთიერთობა გქონდა და მიმოწერაც და რამე და ეგ პერიოდი იყო რა 2013-ში რაღაცან საკაიფოდ ვიყავით მე და შენ იქ რაღაცან ტოტენჰემზე მომენტები გქონდა და რაღაცეები და მაშინ იმას მიმტკიცებდა რაღაცეებს რა. რა ისაო რა ქვია? ვაი მაო ისა რა ქვია? თან ჩემზე კარგად გიცნობდა თუ რა ვირის ის ქონდა რა მოყვა. რაღაცებს მიმტკიცებდა რა იდეაში. ხო და რა მკბენდა ხოლმე რა რაღაც პონჩი. იმეთრა ჩვენ ერთად გავატარეთ სალომეს გაცნობამდე. უნდა სწოდნოდა რომ უფრო მნიშვნელოვანი იყო. რადგან Okay, so he decided to enjoy the botanical views first. So here's just residence, so I love to come up in here and views. You see the golden statue in the column. It's the Freedom Square. If you have not been there yet, join us in front. So we were talking about the Freedom Square over there with the golden statue of St. George. If you can see it in the middle of the alley. And it starts Shota Rustaveli Avenue. So Shota Rustaveli, the greatest of all time, like the GOAT poet that we have, and he wrote the great, like epic poem, "The Night in the Panther's, the Night in the Tiger's Skin," which was deeply dedicated to our woman king Tamara, because on the level of the gossip we know that he was deeply in love with her. So it is the poem about the princess who is the only descendant of the king, like was King Tamara, and that she is risen as the king in future, and that she becomes the king in lifetime of her father. So there are a lot of similarities, but the country or the area is called Arabia. Okay, so of course he could not just write about Tamara. he changed the name into Tinatin, which is another Georgian name. And yeah, it's like the great poem. And by the way, it's also admitted internationally. There are a lot of languages, a lot of people who translated it in their languages. And it's admitted to be one of the greatest poems in the history. So, where's your friend? Oh, he's there. So, the view of the garden. Since then, this is the place where you can find the different type of plants and trees from different countries and from different periods of history. So there are like places, for example, we have the Japanese garden, which is one of my favorite parts, to be honest. And there are the orangeries, and to see some different wild or Georgian or some different origin flowers. And in the end of the Botanical, we have the waterfall. And all these waters, like from the waterfall and the rivers, they are falling into another waterfall that we will see. It is called Lervta.
Through the Narikala Fortress.
The history of this place starts in 360s, to be honest. So it's the 1st century, the capital is in Mtskheta, and we have the invasions from Iran. And the Iranian soldiers and Iranian Shah could not just break the stronghold of Mtskheta, and they just achieved this area, which is a really strategical location in Tbilisi. The river Mtkar is narrowed just in front of the castle, and then it's just generally continuing the trade. And the Iranians started to build up, the Persians back then, built up this small defensive or like fortress type structure. They called it the Castle of Envy. Envy because it should have been competitive to Mtskheta, and it should cause the jealousy and envy. Later on, the name changed into the Shah throne because this Shah, one of their Shahs actually, put the throne on the beheaded Georgians' heads. Yep, it is awkward, it's really awkward, but it is a fact. So people, according to this tragic event, call this place the Shah throne. When the Arabic people came in 650s, and they just wanted to take off the roofs for another 400 years, they changed the place into the observatory. Because, well, we know they are interested in such like things, sciences, and observations of the sky, stars, and different celestial bodies. And it lasted till the Arabic Emirate times. Only in the 13th century, in the Mongolian times, it was finalized as a fortress. So, somewhere in the end of the 13th century, this place was completed as a fortress, and even the name Narikala is Mongolian. And in translation, it means like little fortress. Narin means young or small, little, and Kala is like dungeon, fortress, or prison. So Narikala had 2 secret passages, 2 secret tunnels. One of them was going to Lervta Khevi, the fig valley, the one where we are going for the waterfall, and another one was going to the river Mtkvari. So these 2 secret tunnels were the source for water, for fish, for some different savior tricks to last longer when there's a siege or approachment. So inside we have like 2 famous towers. One of them is famous for explosion because it's called Tbilisi. It is Iranian tower, and gunpowder was saved there in the Russian times. So in around 1827, this castle, well, the part of the castle, the tower and the St. Nicholas Church exploded because of the thunder, as we know. And there is another tower called Istanbul Tower. So Istanbul Tower was built up in around like 16th century, like somewhere 1570s. By the way, we know this from Jean Chardin, the traveler's memories. And Istanbul Tower obviously built up by the Ottomans. Okay, do we have some kind of questions about any fact that I mentioned just?
Of Jesus, which was originally created in the 1st century for the king of Edes province, who was fully ill, and this was the only chance for him to be cured, and he was cured. Afterwards, he started to multiply these wooden icons, and in the 12th century AD, in the times of King Tamara, our woman king, Tamara gave the order to our great goldsmith Okizari to goldsmith it. And by the way, it was kept in Ancha Monastery in nowadays Turkey for 4 centuries. It came back in the 16th century, and this is how the church got the name of the site. Alright, it was not really important. But originally it was built up in 510 by the son of Vakhtang Gorgasali, Dachi the First. So Dachi the First was the king who continued his father's trail to move the capital from Metekhi here. And he also built up the church, but you can see that there are some additions on the sideways and on the top, same as the shelter like in the page. Because it was also constructed in the 17th century by the head of the church. It has some entrance and the bell tower, and not to be ruined. Like some optional, so at least Alex can get if you want to. Okay. And we can have a look from outside as well, because it is totally different. I don't know, maybe because it gives you the vibes. Okay, different from the others. It's not also called it Belgium. Because this was the only church when in Arabic emigration times people could ring the bells for masses and for prayers. So you can stand over here and look inside. So you can enter, sure. It's harder for women. Just as in everything. Yes. Right. So if you look just upon it inside, like in the middle, it's kind of just lost. I mean, downwards you have the remains of the fresco, and on the upside as well, but it was just whitewashed on scale this time. I thought it would be the first half of 12th century, and in 1225, 1227 we had the Khwarezmian Shah Jalal ad-Din who had the incursion here. So he took off the dome and sat on the top of the church with the throne. And why? He was overlooking the tragic event going on the Metekhi Bridge that will cross soon after. On Metekhi Bridge he put the holy icon of Saint Mary with the child, and people were supposed to step on this icon. So of course it was unimaginary, and of course it was pseudo-offense, but that's what he wanted to. This is why the bridge that will go through is also called here. On the right-hand side of the triangle there is the Georgian alphabet that I showed you at the Cathedral page. The same symbolic for the bell tower. Same way. To the right we have another bell tower of this church, which is preserved from 1812, and it's called the example of the Russian classicism, essentially the architectural style, which is like probably the reason that it's safe and years actually. It was already in Soviet times. Well, it was in the idea, but it was not successful until 1950. And the bridge was officially opened in 1951. Since then, it's under the reconstruction, especially now. So hopefully it's going to be open soon.
ये जॉर्जिया की एक मॉस्क है।
and it really tastes like wine.
ठीक है, बहुत ही खूबसूरत मॉस्क बनी हुई है। चलते हैं हम उसके अंदर भी चलेंगे। वाटरफॉल,
I will show this statue by the end of the day when I was bless you. When I was telling to you about establishing here the capital. They hope which went after the desert and they ended up somewhere in here waiting. So the first capital, guys. So the statue is saying symbolically to express and remind us about the legend how Tbilisi became the capital. So symbolically I wanted to
ये एक पार्क है, इधर पब्लिक पार्क बनाई हुई है। इसके अंदर मुझे ये जो है ना वाटर फाउंटेन बहुत अच्छा लगा, इसलिए मैं थोड़ा इसको कैप्चर कर लिया इसको।
and they're romantic when they're at the
ओके, वाह, ये मदर ऑफ जॉर्जियन का जो स्टैचू था उसकी बैक साइड में एक पार्क थी। पार्क की बैक साइड में एक वाटरफॉल है, वो हम देखने के लिए आए हैं। मैं सोचा चले वो भी कैप्चर कर लेता हूँ, वो भी आपको दिखा देता हूँ।
Lobiani, the layered dough. And this is just general dough of khachapuri and lobiani and cream rolls.
ये बेकरी है इधर की,
So whatever you choose,
इसमें
just let me
फेमस जो है ना
know.
जॉर्जियन फूड।
And if you want some drinks as well, like Coke or if you want some lemonade, let me know. I'll have a potato roll, please. Okay?
This potato, this mushroom.
Other opinion that you're here to Panaman khachapuri. And what about your friend?
नो आई डोंट,
Are you sure?
फुल।
Okay. Is your
केबल कार चलती है वो ऊपर से, आप देख रहे हैं वो ऊपर से केबल कार चलती है। ठीक है, अभी हम केबल कार में भी जाएंगे। ठीक है, और आज के दिन का जो टूर है बहुत ही मज़ा आ रहा है, क्योंकि बहुत ही जो है ना, असल में ये सारी जगह जो स्पेशल है ना, यह क्रिश्चियन के लिए, क्योंकि इधर चर्च बहुत ज़्यादा है, उनकी हिस्ट्री है, ये जॉर्जिया में ज़्यादा क्रिश्चियन रहते हैं। ठीक है, लेकिन इधर देखने के लिए बहुत कुछ है, लाइक अ बिल्डिंग, ठीक है, काफ़ी पुरानी बिल्डिंग्स है इधर। स्ट्रक्चर बहुत प्यारा बनाया हुआ है इन्होंने, बहुत ज़बरदस्त किस्म का इन्होंने डिज़ाइन किया हुआ है, बहुत ही मज़ा आ रहा है, ठीक है।
The text preserved about this place that Shah Ismail in 1525, 1526 built up the mosque in the city center. Well, it was one of the first sites that you wanted to invade the country to influence the praying house and the religion, right? There is one concern though.
Ice one.
Tsitka, Tonic, Aurik, Rahuna. These are the Western wines which are mixed inside this tank. But as for the bottle, I mean, we can talk about the bottle. We have separated these three wines. Okay. And because of this mixture, because it's the Western microzones, it's comparatively easier. It's not that heavy, it's not giving you much of hangover, to be honest. Its name is Kharebak al-Khuri. I mentioned Kolkhati before as one of the oldest establishments, and we had the king of Kolkhati, Ayet, whose daughter was Medea, helping Yazan to steal the golden fleece, and the whole story and mythology. So Kolkhuri means Kolkhatian. And the upper one is this red semi-sweet wine, Kinzmarauli. So now what's the difference between dry and semi-sweet wines? So semi-sweet wines cannot be made with the traditional winemaking method, which is Georgian clay pot. No, it doesn't mean it's not Georgian, but we use European method. Because what's happening within the clay pot, we call it kvevri. So kvevri has its own fermentation, okay? So it's having the best temperature in the soil where we bury it. And in the soil, yeah, and it's like covered and just locked. So we're just stirring this mess with what's inside, I mean the juice and cha-cha, like leftovers and whole grapes. And then step by step they get separated. Whatever is going to the bottom, it's called cha-cha, and then it's going to the distillation. That's how we distillate cha-cha.
I think in
Drink.
Bulgaria we call it chachi.
Okay.
I think.
Well, a lot of people think it's same as vodka, it's not. But it's usually more similar to Italian grappa.
It's rakia, yeah, we call it
Rakia.
Rakia.
Yeah, because the method and material is much different from a vodka, and also the degrees and the alcohol contained. But when we want to make it semi-sweet, we use European method because the fermentation is done, the wine is dry. All right. So this is why Georgian traditional wines are always dry.
Makes sense.
Exactly.
Because all the sugar is gone.
All right. Yeah. Good point. So when we use the European method, we can control the fermentation. So we freeze it, and the containment, I mean, the grapes, sugar, and sweetness is contained.
Yeah.
It's maintained in the juice, so the wine stays as semi-sweet, for example.
Yeah, this is really.
ये अंडरग्राउंड बाज़ार, चलें चलते हैं। बाज़ार का नाम आपने देख लिया, सामने लिखा हुआ है। इधर आपको वाइन्स मिलेंगी, पुरानी चीज़ें मिलेंगी, आप देख सकते हैं।
Meryem, evet. Meryem. Tavuk dedi. Meryem is gonna touch you though. O sigara from the telephone. Meryem tavuk dedi. Hello.